No one wanted to help the millionaire's 6-year-old paralyzed son until a poor 7-year-old girl saved his life, leaving everyone in tears. What happens next is shocking. We want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartfelt stories. The commotion erupted without warning. Passengers scattered like startled birds across the polished floor of Boston Logan International Airport's Terminal B. A small boy in an expensive wheelchair lay unconscious, his face ashen against the gleaming marble. His breathing had stopped. "My son! Someone help my son!" Richard Harrison's voice cracked as he knelt beside 6-year-old Ethan. The businessman's tailored suit was rumpled, his composed facade shattered. "He's not breathing, please, somebody!" Airport staff froze in panic. A security guard fumbled with his radio. A flight attendant stood paralyzed, hand over her mouth. "I know what to do." The voice was small but determined. A thin girl with unruly brown hair and scuffed sneakers pushed through the crowd. Her purple backpack was held together with safety pins, her jeans patched at the knees. "Stay back!" Richard's assistant barked. "Mr. Harrison's private medical team is on the way." "But he's turning blue," the girl insisted, dropping to her knees beside Ethan. "My mom taught me I can help." Richard looked up, desperation in his eyes. His son's specialized medical team was still minutes away. Too many minutes. "Let her through," he commanded. 7-year-old Lily Parker moved with surprising confidence. She tilted Ethan's head back, checked his airway, and performed a modified Heimlich maneuver followed by chest compressions perfectly sized for a child's body. 30 agonizing seconds passed. Then Ethan gasped. Color flooded back into his face. His eyes fluttered open, confused but alive. The private medical team burst through the terminal doors too late to save him, but just in time to confirm that someone else already had. She knew exactly what to do, the lead paramedic whispered to Richard, if she hadn't acted. Richard Harrison, who commanded a technology empire worth billions, who negotiated with presidents and kings, found himself speechless before a little girl in worn clothes. "What's your name?" he finally managed. "Lily," she answered, stepping back as the medical team took over. "Is he going to be okay now?" "Yes, thanks to you." Richard's voice caught. "How did you know what to do?" "My mom's a nurse's aide. She can't afford babysitters, so I go to her CPR classes." Lily shrugged, as if saving lives was an everyday occurrence. "She says everyone should know how to help." As the medical team stabilized Ethan, Richard noticed a woman rushing toward them, clearly Lily's mother, wearing scrubs under a threadbare coat, panic on her face. "Lily, I told you to stay by the coffee shop." Sarah Parker reached for her daughter, then froze when she recognized the man standing beside her. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry if she bothered you." "Your daughter just saved my son's life," Richard said quietly. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan's monitoring equipment began to sound alarms. The medical team's expressions turned grim. "Secondary complication," one murmured. "We need to get him to Massachusetts General immediately." As they rushed Ethan toward the exit, Richard turned to Sarah and Lily. "Please, come with us. I don't understand what just happened, but your daughter, she saw something everyone else missed." Die. What Richard couldn't possibly know was how this airport encounter would transform all their lives, and that Lily's intervention was only the beginning of a connection that would challenge everything he thought he understood about wealth, worth, and what it truly means to save someone. 3 days later, Sarah Parker adjusted her uniform in the dimly lit bathroom of their one-bedroom apartment in Dorchester. The pipes groaned in protest as she turned off the faucet. Outside, the first hints of dawn crept through the window with the cracked blinds. "Lily, honey, time to get up," she called softly, knowing her daughter was already awake. Lily sat cross-legged on her fold-out couch, carefully arranging medicine bottles on the coffee table. Not real medicine, Empty containers Sarah brought home from work, labeled with Lily's handwritten prescriptions for imaginary patients. "How's Mr. Whiskers doing today?" Sarah asked, playing along with her daughter's favorite game. "Much better. His fever broke last night." Lily's serious expression mirrored Sarah's own when discussing patients. "But Mrs. Bluebird still needs her special heart medicine." Sarah smiled despite her exhaustion. After her shift yesterday, she'd spent hours at Massachusetts General Hospital, where Ethan Harrison remained under observation. Richard Harrison had insisted on meeting with them, asking endless questions about Lily's medical knowledge. "We need to talk about something important," Sarah said, sitting beside her daughter. "Remember the little boy you helped at the airport? His father called again last night." Lily nodded, her expression brightening. "Is Ethan okay?" "He's doing better. The doctors say what happened was something called autonomic dysreflexia, a dangerous spike in blood pressure that can happen with spinal cord injuries." Sarah chose her words carefully. "His father wants to meet with us again today. He's very grateful for what you did." "I just did what Mom taught me," Lily said, referring to her grandmother, a retired nurse who had passed away the previous year. "I know, sweetie, but Mr. Harrison thinks you noticed signs that even the airport staff missed. He wants to talk about—" Sarah hesitated. How could she explain what Richard had proposed in their brief phone call? "He wants to talk about maybe having you visit Ethan sometimes." The truth was more complicated. Richard Harrison had offered Sarah a staggering sum, enough to cover Lily's education through college, just for agreeing to meet. His exact words still echoed in her mind. "Your daughter has a gift, and my son needs someone with that gift in his life." The intercom buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. "Mrs. Parker." The voice was crisp, professional. "Mr. Harrison's car is waiting downstairs." Sarah glanced around their shabby apartment, suddenly self-conscious. "We'll be right down." 30 minutes later, they were escorted through the pristine corridors of Massachusetts General's VIP wing. Richard Harrison stood as they entered Ethan's room, his expression a mixture of gratitude and calculation. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, before his attention shifted to Lily. His features softened. "Ethan's been asking for you." The boy in the hospital bed looked smaller than Lily remembered. Monitors beeped steadily around him. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "You're the girl from the airport," he said, his voice weak but excited. "Dad says you saved me." Lily approached cautiously. "I'm Lily. I like your space robot." She pointed to a toy perched on his bedside table. "That's Cosmo. He goes on missions with me." Ethan's smile revealed a missing front tooth. "Do you like space?" "I like the stars. My mom and I look at them from our roof sometimes." As the children began to chat, Richard drew Sarah aside. "My son has a condition called transverse myelitis, an inflammation of the spinal cord that caused his paralysis when he was 4, he explained quietly. "What happened at the airport was a medical emergency that his regular caregivers are trained to handle. But they weren't there. You taught your daughter something that saved his life." Sarah nodded cautiously. "My mother was a nurse. She believed in teaching Lily early. I've had 7 specialized caregivers for Ethan in the past year. None of them connected with him. None of them saw what your daughter saw." Richard's gaze returned to the children, who were now examining Ethan's collection of superhero action figures. "I have a proposal. Mr. Harrison, please call me Richard. Richard, I appreciate your gratitude, but if this is about money, it's about my son." The steel in his voice softened. "Ethan hasn't smiled like that since before his diagnosis. Whatever your daughter did, it wasn't just the medical intervention. She saw him, not just his condition." Sarah watched as Lily showed Ethan how to play a clapping game, modifying it so he could participate despite his limited mobility. "I'd like to hire you, Mrs. Parker." "Excuse me?" "As Ethan's care coordinator." And I'd like Lily to visit regularly, compensated, of course, through a trust for her education. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted from the doorway. "Richard, darling, what is this I hear about some airport incident?" A tall, elegantly dressed woman swept into the room, bringing with her the scent of expensive perfume. Her gaze landed on Sarah and Lily, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising. "And who are these people?" "Victoria." Richard's entire demeanor changed. "I didn't expect you until tomorrow." "Clearly." Victoria Harrison, Richard's ex-wife and Ethan's mother, assessed Sarah's uniform and Lily's worn clothing with a single dismissive glance. "Since when do we allow random visitors in Ethan's recovery room?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This is Sarah Parker and her daughter Lily," Richard said evenly. "Lily saved Ethan's life at the airport." Victoria's perfectly composed expression didn't waver. "How fortunate. I'm sure they'd appreciate a generous thank you gift." Lily, oblivious to the tension, continued showing Ethan her clapping game. But Sarah felt the familiar sting of judgment, the same she'd felt throughout her life when crossing paths with people like Victoria Harrison. "We should go," Sarah said quietly. "Ethan needs his rest." "No!" Ethan protested, reaching for Lily's hand. "She just got here. She was going to teach me about the stars." Victoria's lips thinned. "Ethan, darling, I've flown all the way from Paris. Don't you want to hear about my fashion show?" The boy's shoulders slumped. "Yes, Mother." As Sarah gently led Lily toward the door, Richard followed them into the hallway. "Don't leave yet," he said in a low voice. "Victoria will only stay an hour. She never stays longer. Please, consider what I said. This isn't charity. I've seen how Ethan responds to your daughter. That's worth more than anything to me." Sarah hesitated, torn between dignity and opportunity. The trust fund Richard mentioned could give Lily chances Sarah had never dared dream of. "We'll think about it," she finally said. What she didn't say was that she'd already begun to wonder what price they might ultimately pay for entering the Harrisons' world. The Harrison estate sprawled across 5 manicured acres in western Massachusetts, its limestone facade gleaming in the October sunshine. Lily pressed her face against the car window as they passed through wrought iron gates that parted silently at their approach. "Remember what we talked about," Sarah whispered, smoothing her daughter's hair. "This is just a visit. Mr. Harrison wants to thank you properly for helping Ethan." 3 weeks had passed since the airport incident. After multiple meetings and careful negotiations, Sarah had agreed to a limited arrangement. She would consult on Ethan's care plan twice weekly, and Lily would visit for supervised play dates. The compensation was generous enough that Sarah had been able to reduce her hospital shifts from 60 hours to 40. The car stopped before a sweeping staircase. A slender man in a dark suit opened the door. "Mrs. Parker, Miss Lily, welcome to Oak Ridge. Mr. Harrison is expecting you in the south garden." Lily stepped out, clutching the small backpack containing books she wanted to show Ethan. "Is it really south? I know directions. That way is north." She pointed confidently. The man, whose name was Jenkins, they would later learn, blinked in surprise. "That's exactly right, Miss Lily." Mom taught me to always know which way is north," Lily explained, "in case I get lost." Jenkins led them through a marble-floored foyer, larger than their entire apartment, past rooms filled with artwork and furniture that belonged in museums. Sarah fought the urge to check if Lily's shoes were clean enough for the pristine carpets. The south garden turned out to be a temperature-controlled greenhouse filled with exotic plants and butterflies. Richard Harrison sat beside Ethan's specialized wheelchair at a glass table set for tea. "You came!" Ethan's face lit up when he spotted Lily. "Dad, can I show her the butterflies?" Richard nodded, his usual stern expression softening. "Jenkins will help with your chair." As the children moved toward a flowering section where monarchs clustered, Richard gestured for Sarah to sit. "Thank you for agreeing to this arrangement," he said, pouring tea into a delicate cup. "Ethan's doctors have noticed improvement in his vital signs since your visits to the hospital began." Sarah stirred her tea carefully, mindful of the fragile porcelain. "I've reviewed his medical records as you requested. There are some alternative therapies that might complement his current treatment. And I've hired specialists from around the world," Richard said. "Nothing has shown significant improvement. With respect, Mr. Harrison, sometimes children respond better to approaches that don't feel like medical treatments." Sarah set down her cup. "Ethan's body isn't just fighting paralysis, it's fighting isolation." Richard's gaze sharpened. "Explain." "From what I've observed, Ethan's life is highly structured around his medical needs. Necessary, of course, but children also need spontaneity, joy, normal friendship." Sarah glanced toward the children, where Lily was carefully placing a butterfly on Ethan's outstretched hand. "When was the last time Ethan spent time with other children who weren't relatives or paid companions?" "Victoria believes exposure to other children increases his risk of infection," Richard replied stiffly. "With respect, Victoria isn't his primary caregiver, according to your household staff." Sarah held his gaze. "And Ethan's immune system is strong. His records show no heightened susceptibility to common illnesses." For a moment, Richard looked taken aback by her directness. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A short, rusty sound, as if he'd forgotten how. "You're the first person who's spoken to me like that about my son in years," he said. "Everyone else is too afraid of losing their position or my business." "I'm not afraid of losing this job, Mr. Harrison. I'm afraid of failing Ethan." Sarah's voice softened. "He's a remarkable boy who happens to have a medical condition. Not a medical condition that happens to have a boy attached." From across the greenhouse came the sound of Ethan's laughter, bright, unrestrained, and heartbreakingly unfamiliar to Richard's ears. "How does she do that?" he asked quietly. "Make him forget, even for a moment, about his limitations?" "Lily doesn't see limitations the way adults do," Sarah replied. "To her, Ethan isn't defined by what he can't do." Before Richard could respond, the greenhouse door opened. Victoria Harrison entered, immaculate in a cream designer suit, her expression cooling as she took in the scene. "A tea party in the butterfly garden? How quaint." Her gaze fell on Sarah. "I understand you've been offering medical opinions about my son. What exactly are your qualifications again? Nurse's aide, wasn't it?" "Mrs. Parker has been consulting on Ethan's care plan," Richard said sharply. "As we discussed." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, how fortunate to have found someone so resourceful. She turned toward the children. "Ethan, darling, it's time for your physical therapy. Dr. Winters is waiting." Ethan's face fell. "But Lily just showed me how to feed the butterflies." "The butterflies will be here next time," Victoria said firmly. "Your recovery won't wait." As Jenkins appeared to escort Ethan to his therapy session, Lily reached into her backpack and pressed a book into Ethan's hands. "It's about space explorers," she whispered. "You can read it when you're alone and pretend you're on a mission." Ethan clutched the book, his eyes shining with gratitude. As he was wheeled away, he looked back over his shoulder. "You'll come again, right?" "I promise," Lily called after him. Victoria's practiced smile tightened. "How sweet! Though perhaps we should be more careful about the materials Ethan is exposed to. His educational program is quite specific." "It's just a children's book, Victoria," Richard said wearily. "Everything is just something until it becomes a problem, Richard." Victoria turned to Sarah. "While I appreciate what your daughter did at the airport, I'm concerned about the nature of this arrangement. Ethan is impressionable and vulnerable. The implication hung in the air. People like you don't belong in our world." Sarah stood, gathering her composure. "We should go. Thank you for the tea, Mr. Harrison." "Please don't cut the visit short on my account," Victoria said smoothly. I simply wanted to check on my son before my benefit luncheon. Richard's jaw tightened. The visit was scheduled to end now anyway. I'll walk Mrs. Parker and Lily out. As they moved through the mansion's grand hallway, Lily whispered to her mother, "Why doesn't Ethan's mom like us?" "It's complicated, sweetheart," Sarah murmured. "Sometimes people have trouble seeing past differences." At the front entrance, Richard handed Sarah an envelope. "Next week's schedule and the revised agreement we discussed. I've increased the compensation, considering Victoria's involvement." Sarah hesitated before accepting it. "Mr. Harrison, if this arrangement is causing family tension—" "Victoria and I divorced 2 years ago," he interrupted. "Her involvement consists of flying in from Paris or Milan every few months to remind everyone she's Ethan's mother. What you saw today was actually her being interested. It's usually just her assistant who visits." The bitterness in his voice surprised Sarah. "The therapy schedule your daughter and you have proposed makes more sense than anything my expensive specialists have suggested," Richard continued. "I want to implement it immediately. And, Victoria, will adjust, or not. Either way, Ethan's well-being comes first." Richard's expression softened as he looked at Lily, who was examining a large globe in the foyer. "Your daughter has given him something no amount of money could buy. For the first time since his diagnosis, Ethan has a friend who sees him. Not his wheelchair, not his family name." As their car pulled away from the mansion, Lily stared back at the enormous house. "Do you think Ethan gets lonely in there?" Sarah thought about the cold marble halls, the formal gardens, the staff who spoke in hushed tones, and the mother who scheduled appearances with her son between social events. "I think everyone gets lonely sometimes, sweetheart, even in the biggest houses." What she didn't say was that she'd begun to suspect Richard Harrison's wealth had built a different kind of prison, one that isolated his son as effectively as any physical disability. Winter descended on Boston with a vengeance. Snow blanketed the Harrison estate, transforming the manicured gardens into a pristine wonderland. Inside the mansion's West Wing playroom, Ethan watched through floor-to-ceiling windows as Lily attempted to build a snowman on the terrace. "She's making it for you to see," Sarah explained, adjusting Ethan's weighted blanket. "Since you couldn't go outside today." Ethan's condition had worsened temporarily after a respiratory infection the previous week. Though he was recovering well, his doctors had advised against cold exposure. "I hate being stuck inside," he said, frustration edging his voice. "Lily gets to do everything." "Not everything," Sarah said gently. "Remember how she told you about sharing a bedroom with 3 cousins when they visit, and how their apartment doesn't have an elevator, so sometimes they have to carry groceries up 4 flights of stairs?" Ethan considered this. "But she can run and climb trees." "Yes, she can." Sarah didn't sugarcoat the truth. "And that must be really hard to watch sometimes." Ethan's eyes welled with tears. "Dad says I shouldn't complain, that I have everything other kids would want." "Having things isn't the same as being able to do things," Sarah said. "It's okay to feel sad or angry about that." "Mom never wants me to talk about it," Ethan confided. "She says focusing on negative thoughts makes my condition worse." Sarah chose her next words carefully. "Your mum wants you to stay positive, which is important, but it's also important to be honest about your feelings." Outside, Lily had finished her snowman and was waving frantically for Ethan's attention. He managed a small smile and waved back. She made it wearing a space helmet, he noted, spotting the upside-down bowl Lily had placed on the snowman's head. "Like Commander Cosmo." The door opened and Richard entered, brushing snow from his coat. "The roads are getting bad. I've asked Jenkins to prepare the guest rooms for Mrs. Parker and Lily." He glanced at Sarah. "If that's acceptable, the forecast calls for 18 inches by morning." Before Sarah could respond, Ethan's face lit up. A sleepover, like in real families. Richard flinched slightly at his son's phrasing. Yes, I suppose so. Can we have hot chocolate and watch movies? Ethan asked, excitement building. In the media room with the big screen. I don't see why not, Richard said, his expression softening at his son's enthusiasm. I need to get Lily inside before she freezes, Sarah said, moving toward the terrace door, and I should call my neighbor to check on our apartment. As Sarah stepped onto the snowy terrace, Richard followed her. I hope staying here won't be too uncomfortable for you. It's fine, she assured him, waving Lily over, though you should know, I don't normally allow sleepovers on school nights. Richard's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. I believe this qualifies as a snow day exception. Later that evening, after the children had been settled in the media room with hot chocolate and a space adventure film, Richard invited Sarah to join him in his study. The room was surprisingly cozy compared to the mansion's more formal spaces, lined with books and featuring well-worn leather chairs. Bourbon, he offered, pouring himself a glass. No, thank you. Sarah remained standing, suddenly aware of her faded jeans and simple sweater against the backdrop of obvious wealth. Richard gestured toward a chair. Please sit. There's something I want to discuss. Cautiously, Sarah took a seat. Over the past 3 months, she'd grown more comfortable in the Harrison household, but never in this private space, Richard's inner sanctum. Ethan's latest test results came back today, Richard began, his expression unreadable. For the first time since his diagnosis, there's measurable improvement in his autonomic responses. Sarah leaned forward. That's wonderful news. His neurologist is cautiously optimistic. Richard swirled the amber liquid in his glass. He believes the combination of the new therapy regimen and reduced stress levels may be contributing factors. Emotional well-being affects physical health, Sarah said, especially in children. Yes, well. Richard cleared his throat. The point is, whatever we're doing, whatever you and Lily are doing, it's working, and I want to formalize a more permanent arrangement. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a legal document outlining a position for Sarah as Ethan's full-time care coordinator, with a salary that made her breath catch. Attached was a separate document establishing an educational trust for Lily. This is extremely generous, Sarah managed, scanning the figures. But it's not generosity, it's compensation, Richard interrupted. You've accomplished more in 3 months than teams of specialists have in 2 years. Sarah closed the folder. Mr. Harrison, Richard, I appreciate the offer, but this would mean leaving my position at the hospital, my apartment lease, Lily's school. All addressed in the agreement. The position includes housing on the estate, the guest house at the east end of the property. It's completely private, recently renovated. 3 bedrooms, its own garden. Richard leaned forward. And regarding Lily's education, I've arranged for admission to Westbrook Academy. It's where Ethan is enrolled, though he currently has home instructors. Sarah's head spun. Westbrook was one of the most prestigious private schools in Massachusetts. I can't... Before you decide, Richard continued, there's something else you should know. He rose and moved to the window, looking out at the falling snow. Victoria is returning next week, permanently. I thought she lived in Europe. She did, until she learned about Ethan's improvement. His voice hardened. And about your role in his care. I don't understand. Richard turned back to face her. Victoria left when Ethan's condition was diagnosed as permanent. She couldn't handle having a child who didn't fit her perfect image of our family, but now that there's potential improvement. He trailed off. She wants to be part of his recovery, Sarah finished. She wants control, Richard corrected. And she'll use every legal means at her disposal to get it. Unless Ethan continues to show improvement under the current care plan, Sarah realized, with documented medical evidence. Richard nodded grimly. Victoria's lawyers have already requested copies of his medical records. She's building a case that I've been experimenting with Ethan's treatment without proper consideration. But the new therapies are all medically approved, Sarah protested. His doctors support them. Facts don't matter as much as perception in these situations, and Victoria excels at creating perceptions that serve her interests. Sarah considered the implications. You're offering me this position to strengthen your case for maintaining custody arrangements. I'm offering you this position because you've helped my son when no one else could, Richard said sharply. The timing is, unfortunately, complicated by Victoria's sudden renewed interest in motherhood. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silent white. Sarah thought about Lily's excitement at building a snowman for Ethan, about the boy's face lighting up at the prospect of a normal family evening. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Richard nodded. Of course, but not too much time. Victoria arrives on Tuesday. As Sarah left the study, she passed a large portrait she'd noticed before. Richard, Victoria, and a younger Ethan before his illness, posed formally in coordinated outfits. Perfect, polished, and somehow lifeless compared to the excited boy currently sharing popcorn with her daughter in the media room. She wondered what Ethan's life had been like before his diagnosis, and what Victoria Harrison would do to reclaim her vision of the perfect family, now that improvement seemed possible. Sarah had entered the Harrisons' world, hoping to give Lily opportunities she'd never had. Now she feared they'd both become pawns in a battle that had been brewing long before they arrived. The Westbrook Academy gymnasium hummed with excitement. Parents in designer clothing clustered in small groups, their conversations a gentle murmur beneath the classical music piped through hidden speakers. On stage, children in crisp uniforms waited for the Spring Science Fair Awards ceremony to begin. Sarah adjusted her dress, the most expensive she'd ever owned, purchased specially for this occasion, and scanned the crowd for Richard. 5 months had passed since she'd accepted the position at the Harrison estate and moved with Lily into the guest house. 5 months of navigating a world so different from their own that sometimes Sarah felt she was learning a foreign language. Mrs. Parker. Victoria Harrison's voice cut through Sarah's thoughts. How lovely to see you here. Supporting the children, I assume? Sarah turned to find Victoria flanked by 2 women whose jewelry could have paid off Sarah's student loans. Yes, Lily and Ethan worked very hard on their project. Victoria's smile remained fixed. Indeed, though I understand Ethan contributed primarily through verbal direction. The implication that Lily had done all the work hung in the air. Actually, Sarah replied evenly, Ethan did all the astronomical calculations. Lily built the physical model under his guidance. They played to each other's strengths. Before Victoria could respond, the headmaster approached the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Westbrook Academy's 63rd Annual Science Exhibition. We're particularly excited about this year's projects, which have shown exceptional creativity and scientific rigor. Sarah spotted Richard slipping in through a side door, his expression tense. He'd been in New York for emergency business meetings, flying back specifically for the awards ceremony. The headmaster began announcing honorable mentions, and Sarah's attention shifted to the stage. Lily sat beside Ethan's wheelchair. Their project, a working model of the solar system that demonstrated gravitational fields, displayed prominently beside them. Lily whispered something to Ethan, and he grinned, their matching expressions of nervous excitement making Sarah's heart swell. And now for our first-place award in the elementary division. The headmaster paused dramatically. Ethan Harrison and Lily Parker for their project Gravity's Invisible Hands, How Planets Stay in Orbit. The gymnasium erupted in applause. On stage, Lily jumped up in excitement, then quickly composed herself, moving behind Ethan's wheelchair to push him forward to accept the award. The headmaster handed them a gleaming trophy, which Ethan held while Lily beamed beside him. "Would our winners like to say a few words?" the headmaster asked. Lily looked at Ethan, who nodded. They had prepared for this. "Ethan did all the math," Lily began, her voice clear despite her nervousness. "He figured out the exact distances and sizes." "And Lily built everything," Ethan continued. "She made the planets move exactly right. We worked together," they finished in unison, a rehearsed moment that nevertheless carried genuine pride. As applause filled the gymnasium again, Sarah caught Richard's eye. His expression held something she'd rarely seen: pure, uncomplicated joy. The moment was shattered by Victoria's sharp intake of breath beside her. How touching! Though I can't help wondering if the judges were influenced by other factors. What factors would those be, Victoria? Richard had appeared beside them, his voice dangerously quiet. "Simple, human sympathy, darling." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Everyone loves an inspirational story. A privileged boy with a disability and his charity case friend. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Excuse me." "Oh, I don't mean it unkindly," Victoria continued smoothly. "It's wonderful that Ethan is learning about those less fortunate. I just hope the academic standards weren't adjusted for their benefit." "Their project was judged on its scientific merit," Richard said coldly, "as you'd know if you'd bothered to look at it during the exhibition yesterday, which you skipped for a spa appointment." Victoria's perfect composure slipped momentarily. "I had commitments that couldn't be rescheduled." "You always do." Richard turned to Sarah. "I need to speak with you privately about Ethan's upcoming evaluation." As they moved away from Victoria, Sarah noticed the children making their way toward them through the crowd. Lily proudly pushing Ethan's wheelchair, the trophy balanced on his lap. "We won, Dad!" Ethan called, his face flushed with excitement. "First place!" Richard knelt beside his son's wheelchair. "I saw. I'm incredibly proud of you, both of you." "We used real math," Ethan explained eagerly, "not the baby kind. Lily made the motors work so the planets orbit exactly right. The judges said our presentation was the best," Lily added. "Ethan did all the talking because he knows everything about space." Victoria appeared beside them, her expression carefully controlled. "Congratulations, darling. Though perhaps we should celebrate at home. You look tired." Ethan's smile dimmed. "I'm not tired, Mother. We're going for ice cream with everyone else. Dad promised." "I'm sure your father didn't mean—" "Actually, I did," Richard interrupted. "The children have earned their celebration." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Richard, a word." She pulled him aside, but not far enough that Sarah couldn't hear her hissed whisper. "The mediation hearing is next week. If you continue undermining my authority with Ethan, my lawyers will use it against you." Richard's expression hardened. "Letting our son celebrate an achievement isn't undermining your authority. It's being a parent, a role you suddenly excel at, now that you have your live-in consultant." Victoria's gaze flicked dismissively toward Sarah. "The court will be very interested in the unusual domestic arrangement you've established." "There's nothing unusual about employing a qualified care coordinator," Richard replied evenly, "especially one whose expertise has contributed to Ethan's documented improvement." Victoria's perfect smile returned. "We'll let the judge decide what's best for our son. For now, I'll allow the ice cream celebration, but I expect him home by 7 for his medication." As Victoria swept away to socialize with other parents, Sarah approached Richard. "Is everything all right?" "Victoria's pushing for revised custody arrangements," he said quietly. "She claims Ethan's improvement means he no longer needs specialized care at home, that he should divide his time equally between us." "But her home is in Paris," Sarah pointed out, "and Ethan's treatment plan requires consistency." Precisely why I've requested the court appoint an independent medical evaluator. Richard watched as Lily showed Ethan's trophy to some classmates. The evaluation is scheduled for next Thursday. Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We'll make sure Ethan is prepared. It's more than that. Richard's voice lowered further. Victoria is also questioning your role in Ethan's life and Lily's. A cold feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. What do you mean? She's suggesting that your position is inappropriate, that Lily's friendship with Ethan is being leveraged for financial gain. That's absurd, Sarah protested. The children were friends before you offered me the position. I know that. But Victoria excels at crafting narratives that serve her purposes. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration from a man who prized self-control. She's also hired a private investigator to look into your background. Sarah stiffened. She won't find anything scandalous if that's what she's hoping for. No, but she'll find plenty to paint you as someone desperate enough to exploit a situation for personal advantage. Your financial struggles after your mother's medical bills. The second job you took to cover Lily's previous school expenses. The injustice burned in Sarah's chest. Everything she'd done, every extra shift, every sacrifice, had been for Lily's well-being. What do you need me to do? She asked finally. For the evaluation? Nothing different. Continue Ethan's therapy regimen. Document his progress as you have been. Richard hesitated. But there's something else, something I haven't told you. Sarah waited, a sense of foreboding growing. Victoria has requested that during the evaluation period, you and Lily temporarily relocate from the guest house. She's arguing that your presence creates an artificial environment that won't translate to Ethan's care under shared custody. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wants to show that any improvement disappears when we're not around. Essentially, yes. And what did you tell her? That I would discuss it with you. Richard's expression was troubled. The evaluator might view your continued residence more favorably if there was a clearer definition to your role in the household. Sarah frowned. I don't understand. Victoria has suggested to her lawyers that our arrangement appears personal rather than professional. Richard's discomfort was palpable. She's implying there's more between us than an employer-employee relationship. Understanding dawned slowly. She's suggesting we're involved romantically? To what end? To paint me as a man who's replaced his ex-wife with a younger model and who is using his son's medical needs as justification. Richard's voice was bitter. It's a narrative that would play well with certain judges. The wealthy businessman who discards his responsibilities when they become inconvenient. Sarah's mind raced. But there's nothing to support that claim. We've always maintained professional boundaries, which is why I've prepared documentation of your employment contract, separate living quarters, and professional credentials. Richard sighed. But Victoria is persuasive. And wealth creates its own reality sometimes. People believe what they expect to be true. Across the gymnasium, Lily was helping Ethan show their trophy to classmates, her hand steadying it when his grip faltered. The easy friendship between them, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, stood in stark contrast to the adult complications swirling around them. I won't let Victoria use me or Lily to separate Ethan from the care he needs, Sarah said firmly. Whatever the evaluation requires, we'll manage. What she didn't say was that for the first time since accepting the position, she questioned whether she'd made the right decision for Lily. They'd gained financial security and educational opportunities. Yes, but at what cost to their peace of mind? And what would happen if Victoria succeeded in her custody battle? The Harrison world, Sarah was learning, operated by different rules than the one she'd grown up in. Money didn't just buy comfort, it bought narratives, perceptions, and sometimes even truth itself. The hospital corridor was eerily quiet at 3 in the morning. Sarah paced outside the emergency room, her body running on adrenaline and coffee. 8 hours earlier, Ethan had collapsed during his physical therapy session. What began as shortness of breath had escalated to a full autonomic crisis. His blood pressure spiking dangerously, his body unable to regulate basic functions. The double doors swung open, and Richard emerged, his face grey with exhaustion. In the 7 months Sarah had known him, she'd never seen him look so utterly defeated. "The neurologist says it's a setback, not a reversal," he said without preamble. "But they want to keep him for observation at least 3 days. Sarah guided him to a nearby chair. "What triggered it?" "They're not certain. Possibly an infection, possibly stress." Richard's laugh held no humour. "The timing is remarkably convenient for Victoria's custody case." 2 weeks had passed since the science fair. 2 weeks of escalating tension as Victoria's lawyers filed motion after motion, each designed to question Richard's custody arrangements and Sarah's role in Ethan's care. "Has anyone called Victoria?" Sarah asked. "Her assistant says she's on a flight from Milan. She'll arrive tomorrow." Richard rubbed his temples. "Where's Lily?" "With Jenkins at the house. I didn't want her to see Ethan like this." Sarah hesitated. "The medical evaluation is scheduled for tomorrow, with Ethan hospitalized." "It works in Victoria's favor," Richard finished grimly. "Her lawyers will argue that his improvement was temporary, that my care plan failed." A doctor appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Harrison, we have the preliminary test results." As Richard followed the doctor, Sarah sank into a chair, the events of the past hours replaying in her mind. She'd been reviewing Ethan's therapy schedule when Jenkins burst into her office, his usual composure shattered. By the time she reached the therapy room, Ethan was already being loaded into an ambulance, his small body overwhelmed by medical equipment. Her phone buzzed with a text from the night nurse she'd hired to stay with Lily. "Lily keeps asking about Ethan. Says she needs to bring him something important. Should I try to redirect her?" Sarah frowned. Lily had been unusually quiet when Sarah left for the hospital, clutching a book to her chest and avoiding questions. Normally, she'd bombard Sarah with concerns about Ethan's condition. Before Sarah could respond, Richard returned, his expression even more troubled. "The neurologist found something unusual in Ethan's blood work," he said, lowering his voice, though the corridor was empty. "Traces of a medication he's not prescribed." Sarah straightened. "What medication?" "A muscle relaxant, one that, in Ethan's case, could suppress autonomic responses." Richard's eyes met hers. "One that could cause exactly the symptoms he experienced today." The implication hung in the air between them. "That's impossible," Sarah said finally. "Ethan's medications are strictly monitored. I personally review the schedule daily." "I know." Richard's voice was flat. "Which is why I've asked security to review the estate's surveillance footage from the past week. All of it." Sarah's stomach clenched. "You think someone deliberately gave Ethan medication that would harm him? Who would do such a thing?" "Someone who benefits from demonstrating that Ethan's improvement is fragile, that his current care arrangement is inadequate." Richard's expression hardened. "Someone with access to prescription medications and knowledge of Ethan's condition." "Victoria," Sarah whispered, the accusation almost unthinkable. "Or someone acting on her behalf." Richard checked his watch. "I've asked my security team to secure all medication in the house and change the access codes to Ethan's rooms." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang, Lily's ringtone. She answered immediately. "Mum?" Lily's voice was small but determined. "Is Ethan going to be okay?" "The doctors are helping him," Sarah said carefully. He's sleeping now. I need to tell you something important, Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, about Ethan's special vitamins. Sarah frowned. What vitamins, sweetheart? The ones his mom gave him. She said they would make him stronger, but they made him feel funny instead. He didn't want to tell because it was supposed to be a secret between them. Sarah's blood ran cold. She met Richard's questioning gaze and put the phone on speaker. Lily, when did Ethan's mom give him these vitamins? Yesterday morning, before school. She came to his room really early and said it was their special time. But Ethan said they made his tummy hurt and his head feel dizzy. Lily paused. Was I not supposed to tell? Ethan made me promise not to, but now he's in the hospital and I'm scared. Richard's face had gone completely white. Lily, you did exactly the right thing by telling us, he said, his voice carefully controlled. Can you remember what these vitamins looked like? They were in a silver packet. Ethan put one in his pocket to show me later, but he was afraid his mom would be mad if she knew. Sarah's mind raced. Lily, do you know where that packet is now? In my treasure box. Ethan gave it to me at lunch because he said it made him feel weird, and he didn't want to take any more. Richard was already pulling out his phone, dialing his security team. Don't touch it, Lily, he instructed. Jenkins will come get it, and it's very important that you give it to him exactly as Ethan gave it to you. Can you do that? Yes, Lily promised. Is Ethan going to be okay? Was it my fault for not telling sooner? No, sweetheart, Sarah assured her, fighting to keep her voice steady. You didn't do anything wrong, and Ethan will be fine. After ending the call, Sarah and Richard exchanged grim looks. If Victoria deliberately gave Ethan medication that caused this episode, Sarah couldn't even finish the thought. Then she's done more than jeopardize my custody case, Richard said, his voice deadly quiet. She's endangered our son's life. The hour wasn't lost on Sarah. In this moment of crisis, the barriers between employer and employee had fallen away. They were simply two people united in protecting a child they both loved. We need to inform the doctors, Sarah said, already moving toward the nurses' station. If they know what medication he was given, they can treat him more effectively. Richard caught her arm. Wait. If we make this accusation without evidence, Victoria's lawyers will twist it to her advantage. We need the packet Lily has, and we need to confirm what's in it. But Ethan's health is being monitored by the best medical team in Boston, Richard finished. The doctors already suspect some kind of medication interaction. Let's get proof before we make accusations that could affect the custody hearing. Sarah hesitated, torn between immediate medical concerns and the longer-term implications for Ethan's well-being. If they accused Victoria without evidence and were wrong, Richard could lose custody entirely. 2 hours, she finally agreed. Jenkins will retrieve the packet. We'll have it analyzed, and then we tell the medical team regardless of the results. Richard nodded, already texting instructions to his security chief. I've also asked them to check Victoria's private bathroom at the estate, if she brought medication with her during her last visit. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text, this time from Jenkins. Packet retrieved. Security footage shows Mrs. Harrison entering Master Ethan's room at 6:17 a.m. yesterday, leaving at 6:28 a.m. No other household staff present during that time. D. As Richard read the message over her shoulder, his expression hardened into something Sarah had never seen before. It wasn't just anger, it was the look of a man preparing for war. If Victoria deliberately harmed our son to win a custody battle, he said quietly, she's made the biggest mistake of her life. What neither of them realized was that Victoria Harrison had indeed made a catastrophic error, but not the one they imagined. The investigation Richard initiated that night would eventually uncover far more than a custody manipulation. It would expose secrets Victoria had buried for years, including the truth about Ethan's original diagnosis. But for now, in the sterile hospital corridor, Sarah and Richard could only wait for test results, for proof, and for the chance to ensure that Ethan would never again be a pawn in his mother's twisted games. The hospital conference room felt too small for the tension it contained. Richard sat at one end of the polished table, his attorneys flanking him like sentinels. Victoria occupied the opposite end, her expression a careful mask of maternal concern. Between them sat Dr. Eleanor Wells, the court-appointed medical evaluator, her silver-framed glasses perched on a no-nonsense face. Sarah stood near the door, officially present as Ethan's care coordinator, though Victoria's lawyers had objected to her attendance. 3 days had passed since Ethan's collapse. 3 days of tests, accusations, and legal maneuvers that left everyone exhausted. "Let me summarize what we know," Dr. Wells began, her tone clinically precise. Ethan Harrison experienced an acute autonomic episode consistent with adverse medication interaction. Laboratory analysis confirmed the presence of baclofen in his system, a muscle relaxant not included in his prescribed regimen. She turned a page in her file. Further investigation recovered a partially used packet of this medication from the possession of Miss Lily Parker, age 7, who states it was given to her by Ethan after he began experiencing side effects. Victoria's attorney leaned forward. "Which proves nothing about its origin. Children this age are hardly reliable witnesses." "Perhaps," Dr. Wells continued unruffled, "but the security footage showing Mrs. Harrison entering Ethan's room during the time frame in question is more difficult to dismiss." Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I was checking on my son, as any mother would. For 11 minutes, with no other staff present, contrary to household protocols established for Ethan's care." Dr. Wells adjusted her glasses. "Additionally, the pharmaceutical analysis of the packet indicates these pills were obtained in Switzerland, where you maintain a residence, Mrs. Harrison." Richard's attorney slid a document across the table. "We've also obtained Mrs. Harrison's prescription records from her Swiss physician. She was prescribed this exact medication 3 weeks ago for reported muscle spasms." Victoria's face flushed. "This is absurd. You're suggesting I would deliberately harm my own child." "Not harm," Richard said quietly. "Control. You needed Ethan to have a setback before the custody hearing. You needed to prove his improvement under Sarah's care was temporary." "How dare you!" Victoria's voice rose. "I've supported Ethan through every stage of his condition." "Have you?" Richard's tone remained dangerously calm. "Because our son's medical records show you've attended exactly 3 of his 37 specialist appointments in the past year. Sarah has attended all 37. Dr. Wells cleared her throat. "While these accusations are serious, my primary concern is Ethan's well-being. I've reviewed his complete medical history, including the remarkable progress he's made over the past 7 months. She turned to Sarah. "Mrs. Parker, in your professional opinion, what factors have contributed most significantly to Ethan's improvement?" Sarah chose her words carefully, aware of the legal weight they carried. "Consistency in his therapy regimen, certainly, but equally important has been his emotional well-being, particularly his friendship with my daughter and the sense of normalcy it provides." "Normalcy," Victoria interjected. "My son has a serious medical condition that requires specialized care, not playdates." "Your son is first and foremost a child," Sarah replied evenly. "A child who needs connection, purpose, and hope alongside his medical treatment." Dr. Wells nodded thoughtfully. "I've spoken with Ethan's physical therapists and his teachers at Westbrook. They all note significant improvements in his engagement and effort following the implementation of Mrs. Parker's care plan." She closed her file with a decisive snap. Based on my evaluation and the evidence presented, I will be recommending to the court that Ethan remain in his father's primary custody, with continuation of his current care plan under Mrs. Parker's supervision. Victoria's attorney began to protest, but Dr. Wells held up a hand. However, I am also recommending a full investigation into the medication incident, including the possibility of filing charges for child endangerment if the evidence supports such action. The blood drained from Victoria's face. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Mrs. Harrison, Dr. Wells replied. Well, whatever your intentions, giving unprescribed medication to a child with Ethan's condition demonstrates at minimum a dangerous lack of judgment. As Victoria's legal team huddled in urgent consultation, Dr. Wells turned to Richard. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to speak with Ethan now, if he's feeling up to it. Richard nodded. He's been asking about Lily. Would it be possible for her to visit him today? I think that would be beneficial, Dr. Wells agreed. From my observations, their friendship has been a significant positive factor in his progress. As the meeting disbanded, Sarah found herself alone in the corridor with Richard. For a moment neither spoke, the weight of the past day's events settling between them. Thank you, Richard said finally, for everything you've done for Ethan, for standing firm against Victoria's accusations. I didn't do it for you, Sarah replied honestly. I did it for Ethan, and for Lily, who loves him like a brother. Richard's expression softened. I know, that's what makes it mean so much more. He hesitated. Dr. Wells is right about filing charges. If Victoria deliberately endangered Ethan. One battle at a time, Sarah cautioned. Right now, Ethan needs stability, not more family drama. Richard nodded slowly. You're right, as always. His phone chimed with a message. The police investigator wants to interview Victoria this afternoon. I should be there. As he walked away, Sarah realized something had fundamentally shifted in their relationship. The careful professional boundaries they'd maintained for months had been altered by this crisis. They were no longer simply employer and employee. They were allies in protecting a child they both cherished. What Sarah couldn't know was that the investigation into Victoria's actions would uncover secrets far darker than medication tampering. Secrets that would redefine everything they understood about Ethan's condition and the woman who had once been his mother, in name only. Later that afternoon, Sarah brought Lily to visit Ethan. She'd prepared her daughter carefully, explaining the hospital equipment and Ethan's weakened state. But Lily, with the resilience of childhood, seemed unfazed. I brought you something, she announced, placing a small handmade book on Ethan's bed. It's a story about Commander Cosmo getting sick and then getting better and going back to space. Ethan's tired face brightened. Did you draw the pictures? Yep, and I wrote all the words myself, Lily said proudly. The nurse said I can read it to you if you get tired. As Lily settled into a chair beside Ethan's bed, beginning her story with dramatic flair, Sarah stepped into the hallway to give them privacy. She found Richard there, his expression troubled. Victoria's gone, he said without preamble. Checked out of her hotel, booked a flight to Zurich. Her lawyer says she's seeking treatment for exhaustion. Running away, you mean? Sarah translated. Essentially. Richard ran a hand through his hair. The police want to continue the investigation. They've requested access to all of Ethan's medical records, not just recent ones, but going back to his original diagnosis. Something in his tone made Sarah pause. Is that a problem? I don't know, Richard admitted. Victoria handled most of his early medical care. There were specialists in Switzerland, experimental treatments. He shook his head. To be honest, that period is a blur. I was trying to hold the business together while our marriage fell apart. From inside Ethan's room came the sound of children's laughter, a bright, hopeful sound that contrasted sharply with the adult complications swirling around them. Whatever they find, Sarah said quietly. "We'll face it together, for Ethan's sake." What neither of them yet realized was that Victoria's hasty departure wasn't just an admission of guilt. It was the desperate act of a woman who knew that deeper, more damaging truths were about to surface. Truths that would shake the Harrison family to its core. Summer descended on Boston with relentless heat. In the Harrison estate's pool house, modified for hydrotherapy, Ethan sliced through the water with determined strokes, his upper body strength compensating for legs that still needed support. At the pool's edge, Lily cheered him on, stopwatch in hand. 25 seconds, she announced as Ethan touched the wall. That's 2 seconds faster than yesterday. 10 weeks had passed since the hospital incident. 10 weeks of steady recovery, both physical and emotional. The police investigation into Victoria's actions continued, but she remained in Switzerland, her communication limited to formal legal correspondence. Sarah adjusted Ethan's floating supports. "That's enough for today. Dr. Reeves said not to overdo it." "Just one more lap," Ethan pleaded, his face flushed with exertion and pride. "I'm getting stronger every day." "Tomorrow," Sarah promised. "Let's not push too hard." As she helped Ethan from the pool, Sarah marveled at the changes in him. Not just physical improvements, though those were significant, but a new confidence, a willingness to try difficult things without fear of failure. The withdrawn, solemn child she'd first met at the hospital had blossomed into a boy who laughed, argued, and occasionally even tested boundaries like any 8-year-old. Yes, 8. Ethan's birthday had passed in May, celebrated with the first real party he'd ever had, classmates from Westbrook, games adapted so everyone could participate, and a space-themed cake that Lily had helped design. Richard had watched with wonder as his son, once isolated by his condition, became the center of a noisy, joyful gathering of friends. "Miss Sarah?" Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Is Dad coming to watch my therapy today?" Sarah helped him into his wheelchair. "He's trying, buddy, but he had that emergency meeting with the investigators." Ethan's face fell slightly. "About Mom?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "About your medical records. Your dad wants to understand everything about your condition so we can help you continue improving." What she didn't say was that the investigation had taken an unexpected turn. Discrepancies had emerged in Ethan's early medical history, treatments documented but never administered, diagnoses that contradicted each other, and specialists who, when contacted, had no record of ever treating Ethan Harrison. Richard had been devastated when the first inconsistencies surfaced. As more questions arose, his grief had hardened into determination to uncover the full truth, whatever it might be. "Let's get you changed," Sarah said, keeping her tone light. "Lily made lunch for everyone. She's very proud of her spacecraft sandwiches." Ethan grinned. "They're just regular sandwiches cut with a rocket cookie cutter. Don't tell her I told you this, but she practiced cutting them 5 times last night to get them perfect." As they made their way from the pool house to the main residence, Lily ran ahead, eager to prepare lunch with Jenkins' help. The elderly butler had become an unlikely ally in her culinary experiments, his formal demeanor softening whenever Lily asked to assist with household operations. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Meeting running long. Will explain later. Important developments." Before she could respond, another message appeared. "Ask Jenkins to prepare the study. Need to speak with you privately this evening." Sarah frowned. Richard's messages had been increasingly cryptic as the investigation deepened. Whatever the investigators had uncovered today, it was significant enough to warrant unusual precautions. Later, after the children were settled with the movie in the media room, Sarah made her way to Richard's study. Jenkins met her at the door, his expression grave. "Mr. Harrison asked that no electronic devices be brought into the study for this conversation, Mrs. Parker," he said quietly, "if you wouldn't mind leaving your phone here." Puzzled but compliant, Sarah surrendered her phone. Inside, Richard stood at the window, his back to the door, tension visible in every line of his body. "What's happened?" Sarah asked without preamble. Richard turned, his face haggard in ways that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "They've found evidence that Ethan's original diagnosis was fabricated." Sarah sank into a chair. "What do you mean, fabricated?" "I mean that my son's condition, the paralysis that has defined his life for the past 4 years, may have been deliberately induced." Richard's voice broke. "By Victoria." That's not possible," Sarah whispered. "The investigators found a pattern of hospital visits in 3 different countries. Each time, Ethan presented with worsening neurological symptoms that mysteriously improved when Victoria was not present, only to deteriorate again upon her return." Richard pushed a file across the desk. "They're calling it medical child abuse, a variant of Munchausen syndrome by proxy." Sarah opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were medical reports, pharmaceutical records, and statements from hospital staff who had treated Ethan in Switzerland, France, and Germany. "The most damning evidence came from a nurse in Zurich," Richard continued. "She observed Victoria administering something to Ethan's IV when she thought no one was watching. When the nurse reported it, she was suddenly transferred to a different department. The hospital later received a substantial donation from a foundation Victoria chaired." "But why?" Sarah's mind struggled to comprehend such a betrayal. Why would any mother do this to her child? "Control. Attention. The investigators have found a pattern dating back to before Ethan was born." Richard's voice was hollow. "Victoria's social media accounts, her interviews, her charity work, all centered around her image as the devoted mother of a child with special needs. She created foundations, gave speeches, positioned herself as an advocate." He picked up another document. "This is from her private journal, seized during the investigation. She writes about how Ethan's condition made people see her differently, as selfless, as a martyr to motherhood, how it opened doors to social circles that had previously excluded her." Sarah felt physically ill. "Does Ethan know?" "Not yet. The doctors want to conduct additional tests first to determine if there's been permanent damage." Richard passed a hand over his face. "And they've recommended a psychologist specializing in child trauma. This kind of betrayal. It will devastate him," Sarah whispered, "or liberate him." Richard looked up, something like hope flickering in his exhausted eyes. If his underlying condition was induced rather than organic, his recent improvements make more sense. The doctors believe he may regain significantly more function than we ever thought possible. Sarah's thoughts whirled. The episodes at the airport, at the hospital, those were withdrawal symptoms, weren't they? His body reacting when the medications Victoria had been giving him wore off. Richard nodded grimly. "Which is why Lily's intervention was so crucial. She recognized signs of distress that mimicked his previous episodes, but weren't actually related to his neurological condition." A heavy silence fell between them as the full implications sank in. For years, Ethan had been imprisoned not just by his paralysis, but by a web of deception spun by the person who should have protected him most. "What happens now?" Sarah asked finally. "International arrest warrants have been issued for Victoria. Her assets are being frozen. The full medical evaluation of Ethan begins tomorrow." Richard's voice softened. "And I need to find a way to tell my son that the mother he's tried so hard to please has been poisoning him since he was 4 years old." Sarah reached across the desk to take his hand. "Not alone. You don't have to do this alone." "Have." For a moment, Richard's careful composure cracked, revealing the depth of his pain and guilt. "I should have known. All those years I should have questioned more, looked deeper. You trusted his mother to care for him, Any parent would. Not every parent is as blind as I was. Richard withdrew his hand gently. Victoria's manipulations worked because I was too absorbed in my company, too willing to delegate Ethan's care to others. And now? Sarah asked quietly. Now everything changes. Richard's expression hardened with resolve. My son will have the chance to heal, truly heal, from what was done to him. And I will be there for every step of that process, no matter what it costs. What neither of them said aloud was how this revelation would transform their carefully constructed arrangement. If Ethan could potentially recover, if his condition had been artificially imposed rather than permanent, the future they had begun to envision would need to be reimagined entirely. As Sarah left the study that night, she paused to look in on the children. Lily had fallen asleep beside Ethan in the media room, her head resting against his shoulder as the movie played on. Ethan remained awake, his expression thoughtful, as he gently adjusted a blanket over his friend. In that moment, despite the shocking revelations of the day, Sarah felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, these children had formed a bond that transcended circumstance, and perhaps that bond would be strong enough to help Ethan navigate the difficult truths he would soon have to face. The therapist's office at Boston Children's Hospital was designed to feel non-threatening. Walls painted in soothing blues, comfortable furniture arranged in a casual circle, shelves lined with books and toys. Dr. Marissa Chen, a specialist in childhood trauma, sat across from Ethan, her expression kind but professional. "How are you feeling today, Ethan?" she asked. "Confused," he admitted, fidgeting with the wheels of his chair. "Dad and Miss Sarah told me about my mom, about what she did." 3 days had passed since Richard, with Sarah's support, had carefully explained to Ethan that his paralysis might not be permanent, that his mother had been giving him medications that made his condition worse. They had used age-appropriate language, avoided vilifying Victoria directly, and emphasized repeatedly that none of it was Ethan's fault. Still, the confusion and pain in the boy's eyes had been overwhelming. "Confusion is a very normal reaction," Dr. Chen assured him. "You're trying to understand something that's hard even for adults to make sense of." "Was I ever really sick?" Ethan asked, the question that had been haunting him. "You had a mild viral infection when you were 4, Dr. Chen explained. "Most children recover completely, but your mother gave you medications that cause more serious symptoms." "Why?" The simple question contained oceans of hurt. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Your mother has a condition called factitious disorder imposed on another. It means she needed people to see her taking care of a very sick child. It made her feel important and special. So, she made me sick on purpose?" Ethan's voice was small. "Yes. And that was very wrong of her. Adults are supposed to protect children, not harm them." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Dad said I might be able to walk again. Is that true?" "The doctors believe you have an excellent chance of regaining significant mobility," Dr. Chen confirmed. "Your recent improvements show your body is already healing." "Lily says I'll definitely walk again," Ethan said, a hint of a smile appearing. "She says we're going to climb a mountain together when I'm better. Lily sounds like a good friend." "She's the best." Ethan's expression grew serious again. "She never treated me like I was broken, even before we knew about what Mom did." Outside the office, Sarah waited with Richard, their silence heavy with shared concern. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of medical consultations, legal briefings, and careful conversations with Ethan. Through it all, Lily had remained Ethan's steadfast ally, her practical acceptance of the situation, sometimes providing more comfort than adult reassurances. "He'll need time," Sarah said quietly. "This kind of betrayal. It changes how you see the world." Richard nodded, his gaze fixed on the closed office door. The prosecutors want to interview him next week. I've asked them to limit it to one session, recorded, so he doesn't have to repeat himself. Has there been any word on Victoria? Her lawyer says she's entered a psychiatric facility in Switzerland. Voluntary commitment. Richard's voice was bitter. A strategic move to avoid extradition, most likely. Before Sarah could respond, the office door opened and Dr. Chen appeared with Ethan. Despite the difficult conversation, the boy seemed calmer than when he'd gone in. "How did it go, buddy?" Richard asked, kneeling beside Ethan's wheelchair. "Good, doctor. Chen says I can be angry about what happened, that it's normal to feel lots of different things at once." "That's absolutely right," Sarah agreed, relief washing over her at Ethan's composed demeanor. Dr. Chen smiled encouragingly. "Ethan did very well today. We've scheduled another session for Thursday, and I've suggested he might start keeping a journal of his thoughts and feelings." "Can I show Lily my journal if I want to?" Ethan asked. "It's your journal, so that's your decision," Dr. Chen assured him. "Sharing with people you trust can be very helpful." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Chen drew Richard and Sarah aside. "Ethan's showing remarkable resilience," she said in a low voice. "Having stable, supportive adults in his life is crucial right now, and his friendship with Lily provides peer support that's equally important." "We're doing everything we can to maintain normalcy," Sarah assured her. "I can see that." Dr. Chen hesitated. "There is one concern I wanted to raise. Ethan mentioned feeling guilty about his mother being in trouble. He seems to believe he's somehow responsible for what's happening to her." Richard's expression darkened. "That's absurd. He's the victim here." "To an adult, yes. But children often assume responsibility for family problems, especially in situations involving a parent's behavior." Dr. Chen handed them a pamphlet. "This explains some common reactions. The most important thing is to keep reassuring him that none of this is his fault." On the drive back to the estate, Ethan was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the summer landscape flashing by. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked gently. "Dr. Chen said I should try to remember things from before I got sick, to help my brain make connections again." He turned to her with a serious expression. "I remembered something today, about running." Richard glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "What did you remember?" "How it felt. Like flying, but with your feet still touching the ground." Ethan's face lit up with the memory. "I was really fast, Dad. Remember? You used to race me in the garden, and you said I was like a rocket." The simple recollection, Ethan's first spontaneous memory of life before his paralysis, brought tears to Richard's eyes. "You were the fastest 4-year-old in Massachusetts," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "No one could catch you when you got going." "I want to feel that again," Ethan said with quiet determination. "Lily says we should practice every day, even if it's just a little bit." Sarah smiled, thinking of Lily's practical approach to challenges. "That sounds like excellent advice." "Dad," Ethan's voice was hesitant now, "is Mom going to go to jail?" Richard and Sarah exchanged glances, both searching for the right words. "The police are investigating what happened," Richard said carefully. "Your mother is in a hospital right now, getting help for her condition." "Is it like my condition? Something that can get better?" The innocent question landed like a physical blow. How could they explain that Victoria's condition wasn't physical, but a profound distortion of the maternal instinct? "It's different," Sarah said finally. "Your mother's condition affects how she thinks and feels, not her body. The doctors are trying to help her understand why she made the choices she did." Ethan nodded slowly, processing this. "I don't want her to go to jail," he said quietly, "but I don't want to see her either. Is that bad?" "Nobody, it's not bad at all," Richard assured him. "You don't have to see her if you don't want to. And you don't have to decide how you feel about her right now. Those feelings might change over time, and that's okay too. The conversation lapsed into silence as they turned onto the long driveway leading to the estate. As the mansion came into view, Ethan perked up, spotting Lily waiting on the front steps with Jenkins. "She made a welcome home sign," he said, pointing to the colourful banner Lily held, "and she's wearing her lab coat." "That means she wants to do experiments," Sarah chuckled. "What kind of experiments?" "Last time it was testing which toy cars go fastest down different ramps." Ethan's enthusiasm was returning. "She said it's physics, but really it's just fun." As they pulled up to the entrance, Lily bounded down the steps, her face alight with excitement. "Ethan, I set up the obstacle course like we talked about. Jenkins helped me make it accessible but still challenging, just like you wanted." The contrast between the somber therapy session and Lily's unbridled enthusiasm created a perfect balance, acknowledging the gravity of Ethan's situation while simultaneously treating him as a normal, capable child with interests and agency. As Jenkins helped Ethan from the car, Lily launched into a detailed explanation of the obstacle course she'd designed, complete with timers, challenges, and a point system. "The best part," she concluded breathlessly, "is that you can do the whole thing with just your arms right now, but we can adapt it as you get stronger. Doctor." Reeves said, "Building upper body strength is step one for the new therapy program." Richard watched the children head toward the garden, Lily pushing Ethan's wheelchair with confident ease, their heads bent together in animated conversation. "She's extraordinary," he said quietly to Sarah. "The way she accepts him exactly as he is, while still believing completely in what he can become." "That's Lily," Sarah agreed, pride warming her voice. "She's never seen limitations, only possibilities." What neither of them said aloud was how their own relationship had shifted in the wake of Victoria's revelations. The careful professional boundaries they'd maintained had been altered by the shared experience of supporting Ethan through this crisis. They were no longer simply employer and employee. They were partners in helping a child heal from profound betrayal. As they followed the children toward the garden, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression tightened. "It's the prosecutor," he said. "I should take this." Sarah nodded. "I'll stay with the kids." As Richard stepped away to take the call, Sarah watched Lily demonstrating the first obstacle to Ethan, a series of cushions he needed to navigate his chair around in a precise pattern. "The timer starts when you say blast off," Lily explained seriously, "because astronauts need to be precise about timing." Ethan positioned his wheelchair at the starting line, his face set in concentration. "Mission Control, this is Commander Ethan, requesting permission for launch." Lily assumed a formal pose, pretending to speak into an imaginary communicator. "Commander Ethan, you are cleared for launch. Countdown commencing. 3, 2, 1. "Blast off!" Ethan called, and began maneuvering his wheelchair through the course with impressive dexterity. Watching him, Sarah felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, medical, legal, emotional, Ethan Harrison was beginning to reclaim his life, one obstacle course at a time. The rehabilitation center at Massachusetts General Hospital buzzed with quiet activity. Physical therapists guided patients through exercises, monitoring equipment beeped steadily, and in a private room at the end of the corridor, Ethan Harrison took his first unassisted steps in nearly 4 years. "That's it, buddy. You've got this," Richard encouraged, standing a few feet away, arms outstretched. Ethan's face shone with determination and sweat as he balanced between parallel bars, his legs trembling with effort. 3 months of intensive therapy had strengthened muscles weakened by years of disuse. Progress had been slower than anyone hoped, but steadier than anyone expected. "Almost there," Dr. Reeves said from beside Ethan. "Just 3 more steps." Lily, watching from a chair nearby with Sarah, could barely contain herself. "You can do it, Ethan. Remember, astronauts have to learn to walk on the moon. This is just like that." With a final surge of effort, Ethan completed the short journey, collapsing into his father's waiting arms. The room erupted in applause, not just from their small group, but from staff who had paused in the doorway to witness the milestone. "You did it!" Lily exclaimed, rushing forward. "That's 7 whole steps without holding on." Ethan beamed through his exhaustion. "Next time I'm going for 10, Doctor." Reeves helped Ethan back into his wheelchair, still necessary for longer distances, and when fatigue set in. "That's enough for today. Remember, recovery is a marathon, not a sprint." "But I'm winning the marathon," Ethan declared with newfound confidence. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Reeves drew Richard and Sarah aside. "His progress is remarkable. The latest neurological assessment shows continued improvement in nerve conduction." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Richard asked. "It means the damage from the medications Victoria administered wasn't as permanent as we initially feared." Dr. Reeves's expression was cautiously optimistic. With continued therapy, Ethan could regain up to 80% of normal function within a year. The news was better than they dared hope. After the initial shock of Victoria's actions had worn off, the focus had shifted entirely to Ethan's recovery, both physical and emotional. The criminal investigation continued, but Victoria remained in Switzerland, beyond the immediate reach of American prosecutors. "There's something else we should discuss," Dr. Reeves continued, lowering her voice. "Ethan mentioned that his mother contacted him directly. Through email?" Richard's expression hardened. "What? When did this happen?" "Yesterday," according to Ethan. He seemed confused about how to respond. Sarah exchanged an alarmed glance with Richard. Despite court orders prohibiting contact, Victoria had apparently found a way to reach her son. "Excuse me," Richard said, already pulling out his phone to call his attorney. "Left alone with Dr. Reeves." Sarah voiced the concern that had been growing since Ethan's therapy began showing results. "How is he coping emotionally? With the progress, I mean." "Better than many adults would," Dr. Reeves admitted. "He has moments of frustration, of course, but his resilience is extraordinary. Having Lily as a constant support has been invaluable. She treats his recovery as an exciting journey rather than a medical process." Sarah smiled, thinking of how Lily had transformed Ethan's therapy exercises into astronaut training missions, complete with homemade badges awarded for reaching milestones. "And how are you coping, Doctor?" Reeves asked unexpectedly. "This situation has placed enormous responsibility on your shoulders as well." The question caught Sarah off guard. In the whirlwind of Ethan's recovery and the legal proceedings, she'd had little time to consider her own feelings. "I'm fine," she said automatically, focused on helping Ethan. "Doctor." Reeves gave her a knowing look. "And your own daughter, your own future. As Ethan recovers, your role will naturally evolve. Have you and Mr. Harrison discussed what that means?" They hadn't, not explicitly. In the 3 months since Victoria's deception had been uncovered, Sarah and Richard had functioned as a team, their attention fixed on Ethan's needs. The question of what would happen as those needs changed remained unaddressed. "We're taking it one day at a time," Sarah said finally. Before Dr. Reeves could respond, Lily appeared at Sarah's side. "Mom, Ethan wants to know if we can stop for ice cream on the way home. He says it's tradition after therapy." "Tradition, huh?" Sarah smiled, grateful for the interruption. "I think that can be arranged." Later, as they sat at an outdoor table at Ethan's favorite ice cream shop, Sarah watched the children comparing flavors and making plans for their weekend science project. Richard sat beside her, still on the phone with his attorney, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Victoria sent the email through a third party," he explained as he ended the call. making it harder to trace and technically circumventing the restraining order. Her lawyers are arguing that she has a right to communicate with her son. What did the email say? Sarah asked quietly. That she's getting better, that she loves him and misses him. That everything she did was because she thought it was best for him. Richard's voice was tight with controlled anger. Classic manipulation. How did Ethan react? He didn't tell me about it at all. Richard's hurt was evident. After everything we've been through, he kept it secret. Sarah placed a hand on his arm. Not because he doesn't trust you, because he's trying to process it himself first. Remember what Dr. Chen said, children often feel caught between parents, even when one has harmed them. Richard sighed, watching his son laugh at something Lily had said. He's come so far. I don't want anything to set back his progress. Ethan is stronger than you think, Sarah said gently, than any of us thought. He's learning to stand on his own, literally and figuratively. Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan calling across the table, Dad, can Lily sleep over tonight? We want to finish our solar system model before the Science Museum trip tomorrow. Richard's troubled expression softened. If it's okay with Mrs. Parker. Please, Mom, Lily pleaded. I already packed my overnight bag, just in case. Sarah laughed. Always prepared, aren't you? Yes, it's fine with me. As the children returned to their animated discussion, Richard leaned closer to Sarah. Would you have dinner with me tonight, while the kids are working on their project? The question caught her by surprise. In all the months they'd worked together, they'd never shared a meal without the children present. Just dinner, Richard clarified, seeing her hesitation. To discuss Ethan's progress and other matters that we've been putting off. Sarah understood the unspoken reference to Dr. Reeves's question about the future. As Ethan recovered, the arrangement that had brought them together would inevitably change. Perhaps it was time to acknowledge that reality. Dinner would be nice, she agreed. What neither of them could have anticipated was how that simple dinner conversation would transform their carefully constructed professional relationship into something neither had been looking for, but both, perhaps, had been needing. Later that evening, in a quiet corner of the estate's garden, Richard and Sarah sat at a small table Jenkins had prepared with candles and a simple but elegant meal. The formal dining room had seemed too imposing for the conversation they needed to have. To Ethan's progress, Richard said, raising his glass in a toast. And to Lily's unwavering belief in him, Sarah added. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily from updates on Ethan's medical progress to Lily's latest academic achievements to the upcoming school year. It was only when Jenkins had cleared the main course that Richard broached the subject they'd been avoiding. Dr. Reeves mentioned something about discussing the future, he began carefully, as Ethan continues to recover. Sarah nodded, setting down her glass. My position was created for a child with different needs than Ethan may have in 6 months or a year. Yes, Richard hesitated. But that doesn't mean your presence in his life, in our lives, is any less important. The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Richard, Sarah began cautiously, we've been focused on the children, on getting through this crisis. We haven't really had time to consider what comes next. I've considered it, he admitted. More than you might think. Before he could continue, a shout from the house interrupted them. Lily stood on the terrace, waving frantically. Mom, Mr. Harrison, come quick, Ethan's walking by himself. Bidid. They rushed inside to find Ethan standing unassisted in the media room, one hand braced lightly against a chair, but otherwise supporting his own weight. I wanted to surprise you, he explained, his face shining with pride. I've been practicing in secret with Lily. 3 whole minutes so far, Lily announced, showing them the stopwatch she was holding. A new record. The moment of shared joy, the children's triumph and the adults' wonder, crystallized something that had been forming between them for months. They had become, in every way that mattered, a family. As Ethan carefully lowered himself back into his wheelchair, exhausted but exhilarated by his achievement, Richard's hand found Sarah's, their fingers intertwining naturally. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not just for the children's sake, but for their own as well. Autumn painted the Harrison estate in brilliant reds and golds. Leaves crunched underfoot as Ethan walked slowly along the garden path, one hand on his walking cane, the other gripping Lily's arm for support. 5 months into his intensive rehabilitation, he could manage short distances independently. A miracle according to his doctors, an inevitability according to Lily. "Not so fast," Sarah cautioned from a few steps behind. "Remember what Dr. Reeves said about pacing yourself." "I'm fine, Miss Sarah," Ethan insisted, though his legs trembled slightly with effort. "Today's special. I want to walk the whole way myself." Today was special indeed. After months of legal proceedings, depositions, and medical evaluations, the district attorney had reached a settlement with Victoria's attorneys. In exchange for a full confession and agreement to undergo psychiatric treatment, she would avoid prison time, but permanently surrender all parental rights to Ethan. Richard waited on the terrace, watching his son's determined progress with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness. The boy who approached him, walking with difficulty but walking nonetheless, was living proof of both terrible betrayal and remarkable resilience. "Look, Dad," Ethan called. "No wheelchair today." "I see that, buddy. You're doing amazing." Richard came down the steps to meet them, steadying Ethan as he navigated the slight incline. "Is it time yet?" Ethan asked eagerly. Richard checked his watch. "Almost. The lawyer will call any minute." They settled at the outdoor table, a tablet computer positioned where everyone could see it. Jenkins appeared with hot chocolate for the children and coffee for the adults, a small comfort on a day filled with complex emotions. "Are you nervous?" Lily asked Ethan, her usual directness softened by genuine concern. Ethan considered the question seriously. "A little, but mostly I feel ready. I feel like when we've practiced really hard for a science presentation." Sarah marveled at his composure. At 8 years old, Ethan Harrison had endured more betrayal and physical challenges than most adults would face in a lifetime. Yet here he sat, hands steady around his mug, prepared to witness the legal severing of his relationship with the mother who had harmed him. The tablet chimed with an incoming video call. Richard answered, and the serious face of their family attorney appeared on screen. "Good afternoon, everyone. Are you ready to proceed, Ethan?" Ethan nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir." "The judge will join momentarily. This is an unusual arrangement. Normally these proceedings happen in court, but given the circumstances, the judge agreed to this format." Will my mother be there?" Ethan asked, his voice catching slightly. "No. She's provided written statements, and her attorneys will represent her interests. You won't have to see or speak with her." Ethan's relief was visible. In the months since Victoria's actions had been revealed, he had worked through many complex feelings with Dr. Chen: anger, confusion, grief, and eventually a kind of acceptance. But he remained adamant about not wanting direct contact with his mother. The screen split to include a distinguished older woman in judicial robes. "Good afternoon. I'm Judge Eleanor Winters. Is Ethan Harrison present?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ethan sat up straighter, the formal manners instilled by years of private tutoring automatically engaging. The judge's stern expression softened slightly. "Hello, Ethan. I want to explain what's happening today in terms you can understand. Is that all right?" "Yes, ma'am. Today, your mother is legally giving up her rights as your parent. This means your father will have sole legal custody of you moving forward. Do you understand what that means?" Ethan nodded. It means my dad makes all the decisions about my care, and she won't be able to make me see her if I don't want to." "That's correct." Judge Winters regarded him seriously. "The law requires me to ask if you have any questions or concerns about this arrangement." Ethan glanced at his father, then at Sarah and Lily, drawing strength from their presence. "Just one question, Your Honor. Will this be permanent, really permanent?" "Yes, Ethan. Once finalized, this decision cannot be reversed." "Then I don't have any concerns," he said with quiet dignity. "I want to stay with my dad and with Ms. Sarah and Lily." He stumbled slightly over the last words, uncertain how to define the relationship that had evolved over the past year. The judge nodded, making a note. "I understand Ms. Parker and her daughter have become important figures in your life." "They're my family now," Ethan said simply. "Lily saved me twice, first at the airport and then by believing I could get better, and Ms. Sarah helped me learn to walk again." The straightforward declaration brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Beside her, Richard reached for her hand under the table, a gesture that had become natural in recent months. The proceedings continued with legal formalities, documents displayed on screen, signatures verified, statements read into the record. Throughout, Ethan remained attentive, occasionally whispering questions to Lily, who answered with her characteristic blend of seriousness and simplicity. Finally, Judge Winters addressed them directly again. "Having reviewed all evidence and statements, and in accordance with the agreement reached between parties, I hereby terminate the parental rights of Victoria Harrison with respect to Ethan Harrison, granting sole legal and physical custody to Richard Harrison." She paused, looking directly at Ethan. "Young man, I've presided over many difficult family cases, but few have demonstrated the courage and resilience I've seen in you. I wish you continued healing and happiness with your father and those who truly care for your well-being." With that, the hearing concluded. As the screen went dark, a profound silence settled over the terrace, broken only by the rustle of autumn leaves in the gentle breeze. "Is it really over?" Ethan asked finally. Richard nodded. "It's really over, buddy." "Then can we have the special dinner now? The one Jenkins has been cooking all day." The simple request, so normal, so childlike, broke the tension. Sarah laughed softly. "Yes, I think it's definitely time for the celebration dinner." As Lily helped Ethan to his feet, Sarah and Richard lingered behind, watching the children make their way slowly toward the house. "He's going to be okay," Sarah said quietly. "Better than okay." "Thanks to you," Richard replied. "Both of you." He turned to face her fully. "Sarah, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Something I've been considering for months now." Before he could continue, Jenkins appeared at the terrace door. "Pardon the interruption, sir, but there's an urgent call from the Boston office. The merger negotiations have reached a critical point." Richard sighed. "I'll be right there." As Jenkins withdrew, he turned back to Sarah. "We need to finish this conversation. Tonight, after the children are asleep?" Sarah nodded, curious about the intensity in his expression. "Of course." What she couldn't know was that Richard Harrison, a man who planned business strategies years in advance, had been planning this particular conversation with uncharacteristic nervousness, revising his approach repeatedly over the past weeks. Later that evening, after a celebration dinner filled with laughter and plans for Ethan's continued recovery, after the children had finally fallen asleep watching movies in the media room, Richard led Sarah to the garden where they had shared their first private dinner months before. Lanterns illuminated the space with warm light, and a small fire pit warded off the autumn chill. Jenkins had prepared coffee and dessert, then discreetly withdrawn, leaving them alone under the star-filled sky. When Ethan was first diagnosed, or rather, when we believed he had been diagnosed, I thought our lives were defined by limitation Richard began. Everything became about what he couldn't do, what he would never experience. Sarah nodded, understanding all too well how medical challenges could narrow one's vision of the future. Then you and Lily entered our lives, Richard continued, and suddenly the focus shifted to possibilities rather than limitations. You saw my son, really saw him, when everyone else, including me, saw only his condition. Lily was the one who truly saw him first, Sarah reminded him gently. Yes, but she learned that perspective from you. Richard took her hand. Sarah, this past year has transformed not just Ethan's life, but mine as well. What began as a professional arrangement has become something else entirely. Sarah's heart quickened. They had been moving toward this conversation for months, both recognizing the shift in their relationship, but neither quite ready to name it. Something that I hope you felt too, Richard added, a rare uncertainty in his voice. I have, Sarah admitted, but I've been cautious. Our circumstances are complicated. The children, your position, our different backgrounds. None of that matters to me. Richard's grip on her hand tightened. What matters is that for the first time since before Ethan's illness, I've found joy again, purpose beyond work. And that's because of you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Not a ring box, Sarah noted with a mixture of relief and curiosity, but something else. This isn't a proposal, Richard clarified, seeing her expression. Not yet. That would be rushing things, even for a man accused of making impulsive business decisions. He smiled wryly. But it is a promise, and a question about our future. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver key. This is the key to a house I've purchased in Cambridge, near enough to Ethan's rehabilitation centre and the children's school, but separate from this estate with all its history. Sarah looked at him in confusion. I don't understand. I'm asking if you and Lily would consider moving there with us, not as Ethan's care coordinator, but as... He hesitated, as my partner, as a family, in whatever way makes sense for all of us. The offer was breathtaking in its simplicity and its implications. A fresh start, away from the shadow of Victoria's deception, in a home that would belong to all of them equally. The children have already formed a bond stronger than many siblings, Richard continued, and you and I. He met her gaze directly. I love you, Sarah. I think I have for months now. I just wasn't sure how to bridge the gap between employer and something more. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. Richard, Her response was interrupted by a small voice from the garden path. Mom, are you out here? Lily stood in her pajamas, looking sleepy but determined. Ethan had a bad dream. He won't say what it was about, but he's really upset. Sarah and Richard exchanged glances, the moment suspended but not broken. We'll be right there, Richard said, tucking the key back into his pocket. As they followed Lily back to the house, Richard whispered, To be continued. Sarah nodded, her heart full of certainty despite the interrupted conversation. Definitely to be continued. What they found in the media room was Ethan sitting up on the couch, tears streaming down his face. I dreamed Mum came back, he confessed as they gathered around him, that the judge changed her mind. That can't happen, Richard assured him, sitting beside his son. The decision is final. But what if she tries to take me away anyway? Ethan's fear was palpable. She did bad things before. She might again. Sarah knelt in front of him. Ethan, your mother is getting treatment in a secure facility. There are legal protections in place. And most importantly, you have us, all of us, watching out for you. Like a protective force field, Lily added sleepily, curling up beside her friend. Remember in our space game, multiple layers of defense. The simple analogy seemed to comfort Ethan. Can you all stay here tonight? He asked. Just for tonight. Richard and Sarah exchanged glances over the children's heads. Their important conversation would wait, but the answer to his larger question was already forming in Sarah's heart. These two children, one born to her, one brought to her by circumstance, had created a family bond that transcended biology or legal definitions. "We're not going anywhere," she promised Ethan, and in that moment she was answering Richard's unfinished question as well. The Cambridge house gleamed in the May sunshine, its red brick exterior complemented by window boxes overflowing with spring flowers. A basketball hoop stood in the driveway, and colourful chalk drawings decorated the sidewalk, signs of the children who had made this house their home over the past 7 months. Inside, organised chaos reigned as final preparations were made for Ethan's 9th birthday party. Lily, now 8.5, directed operations from the kitchen counter, checking items off a list with exaggerated importance. Astronaut ice cream, check. Moon rock cookies, check. Space punch, still needs more blue food colouring, she announced to Sarah, who was assembling goodie bags shaped like rocket ships. More blue? It's already the colour of windshield wiper fluid, Sarah laughed. It needs to look like the rings of Neptune, Lily insisted. That's Ethan's favourite planet now. In the living room, Richard and Ethan assembled the final piece of the party setup, a telescope positioned to allow guests to observe the afternoon sun through a special solar filter. "Careful with the alignment," Ethan cautioned his father. "It has to be exact or we won't see any solar prominences." Richard smiled at his son's precise instructions. Gone was the withdrawn, solemn child of a year ago. In his place stood a confident boy who walked with only a slight limp, who corrected his science teacher about astronomical facts, and who had recently been elected class president at Westbrook Academy. The doorbell rang, and Ethan hurried to answer it. Not running yet, but moving with increasing steadiness. The physical therapists were amazed by his progress, attributing it to a combination of intensive rehabilitation, freedom from the medications that had suppressed his neurological function, and perhaps most importantly, the emotional security of his new family structure. "Jake, you're the first one here," Ethan greeted his best friend from school. "Come see the telescope we set up." As more guests arrived, classmates, neighbours, members of Ethan's astronomy club, the house filled with the joyful noise of children excited about cake, presents, and the promise of viewing the sun through a real telescope. Sarah found herself momentarily alone in the kitchen, watching through the window as Richard organised the children for the first activity, a space mission obstacle course in the backyard. The silver band on her left hand caught the sunlight, still new enough to make her smile each time she noticed it. Their engagement had been announced at Christmas, 6 months after moving into the Cambridge house together. The transition had been remarkably smooth, the children already accustomed to living as a family unit, the adults having built a foundation of mutual respect that evolved naturally into deeper love. Victoria remained in Switzerland, continuing her psychiatric treatment. Her lawyers had negotiated a settlement that included substantial financial compensation to Ethan, held in trust until his adulthood, and a complete legal separation from her son's life. The criminal charges had been resolved through international diplomatic channels, resulting in restricted movement and mandatory treatment rather than imprisonment. Ethan occasionally asked about her, his questions becoming more sophisticated as he grew older and began to understand more about mental illness. With Dr. Chen's guidance, Richard and Sarah answered honestly but age-appropriately, emphasizing that Victoria's actions reflected her illness, not any failure on Ethan's part. "Need any help?" Richard's voice pulled Sarah from her thoughts. He slipped an arm around her waist, both of them watching the children playing in the yard. "I think everything's under control," Sarah replied, leaning against him. "Lily has been planning this party for months. She's determined it will be the best birthday ever." "She gets that organizational streak from you," Richard observed with a smile. "And her stubbornness," Sarah agreed, though Ethan's developing plenty of that himself lately. A healthy sign, according to Dr. Chen. He's secure enough to assert himself. They stood in comfortable silence, savoring the moment of quiet amid the birthday chaos. Through the window, they could see Lily helping a younger child navigate the obstacle course, her patience and encouragement a mirror of Sarah's own approach to caregiving. "Hard to believe how much has changed in 18 months, Richard said quietly. "That day at the airport feels like another lifetime." "For Ethan it was," Sarah replied. Everything changed when Lily spotted what everyone else missed. The parallel to their own relationship wasn't lost on either of them. Richard had spent years surrounded by people who saw his wealth, his power, his status, but Sarah had seen the father struggling to protect his son, the man beneath the billionaire facade. And Sarah, who had spent her life caring for others while downplaying her own expertise, had been seen by Richard for the exceptional woman she was, knowledgeable, compassionate, and fiercely protective of those she loved. "Mom! Dad! It's time for the telescope demonstration," Lily called from the backyard, the terms "mom" and "dad" now used interchangeably by both children for both adults, a natural evolution that had occurred without discussion or instruction. As they joined the excited group of children, Ethan stood beside the telescope, explaining with impressive detail how the solar filter worked and what features they might observe on the sun's surface. "One at a time, and don't touch the eyepiece," he instructed with authority. "And remember, we're looking at actual solar prominences, huge explosions of plasma that extend thousands of miles from the sun's surface." The children lined up eagerly, each taking their turn at the telescope, while Ethan provided scientific commentary. Lily stood beside him, handing out stickers to each child after their observation, a smooth partnership they had developed through countless science projects. "They're quite a team," Richard murmured to Sarah, "like their parents." Sarah squeezed his hand in agreement, thinking of the journey that had brought them here. From an airport emergency to a backyard birthday party, from strangers to family. Later, as evening approached and the last guests departed, the four of them sat on the porch swing, slightly squished together but unwilling to separate. Ethan's gifts were piled nearby, his favorite, a professional astrophotography camera, already being examined with Lily's help. "Best birthday ever?" Sarah asked. Ethan nodded emphatically. "The best. And next year will be even better, because I'll be able to play in the basketball tournament at school. Dr. Reeves says my coordination should be good enough by then." "One day at a time," Richard reminded him gently, their shared mantra for the recovery process. "I know, Dad, but it's good to have goals." Ethan's tone was matter-of-fact. "Like how you and Mom have the wedding goal for August." Sarah smiled at his practical approach. The children had been the first to know about the engagement, their reaction a mixture of "finally" and detailed questions about whether the ceremony would include space-themed elements. It would not, despite Lily's persistent lobbying for astronaut formal wear. "Speaking of goals," Lily interjected, "remember our mountain climbing one? From when you were first getting better?" Ethan grinned. "Dr. Reeves says we can try hiking this summer. Not a mountain yet, but maybe next year." "Small steps lead to big achievements," Sarah said, echoing another recovery mantra. "Like at the airport," Lily added. "I just did one small thing, but it changed everything." The simple observation captured the essence of their journey, how a single act of seeing someone clearly, of reaching out when others stood back, could alter the course of multiple lives. As twilight deepened around them, Ethan pointed to the first star appearing in the evening sky. "Make a wish, everyone." "I don't need to," Richard said quietly. "Everything I could wish for is right here." Sarah leaned against his shoulder, watching the children's faces as they closed their eyes to make their birthday wishes. From an airport emergency to this peaceful porch, their path had been unexpected and sometimes difficult, but had led them exactly where they were meant to be. Family wasn't always about blood or birth. Sometimes it formed in the most unexpected moments, when one person truly saw another and reached out a hand to help. Sometimes it grew from crisis into something beautiful and enduring, and sometimes, as Lily had shown them all that day at the airport, the most important thing was simply being willing to step forward when everyone else stepped back. As stars continued to appear in the darkening sky, the four of them remained on the porch swing, connected by bonds stronger than circumstance, stronger than biology, stronger even than the challenges they had overcome together. They were, in every way that mattered, a family, forged in crisis, strengthened through healing, and now moving forward together into whatever the future might hold.